Yeah, he can hear us. Okay.
Great. Welcome, everybody, to Reads and Company. My name is Jason Hafer. I am one of the owners of the bookshop here in Phoenixville, Pennsylvania. For those of you who aren't familiar with the store, we are located about 25 miles northwest of Philadelphia. We are very empty right now, but we are, right now anyway, open for browsing and shopping 7 days a week, 11 to 6. With all the necessary precautions. A few notes before we get started. We have had some technical issues tonight, so I think we have like a small fix that we're going to try to use. Apologies in advance if any of the discussion seems disjointed, but I think we have a viable solution. Just so you all know, the audio is muted for you, so we can't hear you. Anyone can see the chat, so if you do type into the chat, and we'll monitor it for any questions, but just be aware that everybody can see the chat. Both James and Lisa were kind enough to sign book plates to be included with their books, which are for sale underneath us via the button there. And also, we do have some time reserved at the end for question and answers. So if you do have any questions, please submit them via the Ask a Question button at the bottom as well. Our guests tonight are James Lee Burke and Lisa Unger. James Lee Burke has just published A Private Cathedral, and Lisa has just published Confessions on the 745, and she's showing them off here for us. With the publication of Private Cathedral, James Lee Burke celebrates the publication of his 40th novel, which is another incredible achievement by one of our most beloved mystery writers. Lisa Unger's latest novel, Confessions on the 45, has just been released to rave reviews, and we expect it to be also a best-selling book. Just to give you a sense of what people are saying about these books, about A Private Cathedral, the New York Times said, Burke has concocted his usual gumbo of thrills and chills, stirred it with gusto, and seasoned it with plenty of local superstition and rumor. What makes these books so enduring, and this is the 23rd in this series, the storytelling so seductive, is that Burke has the voice to do justice to the region's ancient curses and modern crimes. Publishers Weekly, in a starred review, said, an imaginative blend of crime and other genres, Burke's existential drama is both exquisitely executed and profoundly moving. For Lisa's newest book, Confessions on the 745, Publishers Weekly, also in a starred review, said it's diabolically clever, an exquisitely crafted psychological thriller. Unger just keeps on getting better and better. We agree here at Reads and Company. Tampa Bay Times said Confessions of the 745 is Lisa Unger's master class in suspense. And finally, the New York Times said crime fiction like you've never seen it before. It's brilliant. So James and Lisa, welcome to Reads and Company.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for being here. One of the issues, we're getting a little bit of an echo, so I'll be kind of muting and unmuting. But the first question, and James, we'll start with you, if that's okay. We've done about 20 of these virtual events. We started them in April, but I've asked every guest of ours the same question to start, and that is, how are you doing during such a crazy time?
Well, it's a perilous time in many ways. The COVID-19 is part of it. The rest of it is political. But I never thought I would live into an era in which we have entered.
Yeah, it's been something. Lisa, are you still with us? Do you want to chime in on how this time has been for you?
Yeah, I mean, this is a very dark moment for our country and for the world. There's COVID, of course, and then, as Jim said, also, there's the political unrest. So it's a challenging time. I know it's challenging for a lot of creatives. But, for me, like, I've always just I've been, writing since I was a kid. And so the page, both what I'm writing and what I'm reading, it's always like an escape hatch for me. It's the place where I go to kind of metabolize the world and, work through the questions I have about people and what makes them who they are. And I, definitely have a lot of questions right now. So it's definitely been the place where I always go to, to try to work through those things. So it's been kind of a safe space for me during a time when the world is, not as controllable as what's going on in my fiction.
Yeah. So, okay. We're thrilled. A lot of times for these events, I do the interviewing, but Lisa's been so gracious to be with us tonight to talk to James. So I'm going to turn it over to them. Just again, we have been getting some feedback, so I'm going to drop off the screen here, and I will be doing my best to limit that kind of behind the scenes. So I'm going to turn it over now. I will just drop myself out of here.
Bye. Hi, Jim. It's such an honor. And so so everybody who's watching, the problem is that James is muted while I am talking, because otherwise there's a strange echo. So we're going to try to have our conversation that we've been hoping to have, but we'll just be a little bit delayed in doing that. I'm looking in the chat section here, and I'm seeing a lot of my author pals. So I knew that a lot of people were going to turn out tonight to listen to us talk, Jim. And I mean, sure, of course, it goes without saying that I'm a lifelong fan. And your 40th novel, what an amazing accomplishment. A Private Cathedral is, just your signature blend of, absolutely beautiful prose and gripping crime fiction. And, I don't think there's anybody that writes the way you do. And it's a real gift. And I know that for many of the people here in the chat, that you've been an inspiration, that you've inspired so many writers. So thank you for everything that you've done. And thanks for being here. And also, do you know that Alifair is like one of my besties? So that's really cool too. So I wish we could just kind of hang out and talk, but I guess we'll just have to go ahead and do it this way. So at the very beginning of A Private Cathedral, it's kind of a very like internal moment, and you said something in there that really made me think and made me laugh. You were talking about the 3% club, and which really struck me as being just, very, very true. Can you talk a little bit about that and how it relates to the idea of the private cathedral, or the cathedral where you're alone and you can only hear your own beating heart? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yes, the novel, A Private Cathedral, begins with a narration by the protagonist, Dave Robicheaux, who's a sometimes police officer. But he's right there next to a amusement pier, looking out at the ocean at about 9 or 10 o'clock at night. And he has this sense of mortality. And he speaks about what he calls the 3% club. And this is a group of people who have been through what some call the long night of the soul. And when people go through that experience, they're never the same again. Anyone listening out here now who has been through it knows what I'm talking about. You really get your ticket stamped, and you enter into a kind of separate environment, a separate cathedral. And that's what the book is about in many ways. That's at the heart of it.
So I know that, again, there are a lot of writers in the audience, and I heard you speak I don't know how many years ago it was, with Michael Connolly. It was at BoucherCon, and he interviewed you, and you did a lot of talking about your career trajectory. Your career trajectory. And I love to hear about this, because I think your journey is so amazing, and it's something I think that like a lot of writers maybe need to hear about, because most people, when they talk about their career, they want it to seem as though they've like sprung from Zeus's head in a full suit of armor, right? Like they sort of came out of the gate, and everything was gangbusters from there. But usually that's not true. Usually there's a long journey to the place of success, and certainly the place that you hold in our community as a legend and an icon. So I know that you had 2 books that were published early, and then after that, there was a point where you couldn't get published. And I wanted to talk specifically about that, about how you kind of navigated that moment, and also to touch on the other thing that I've heard you say about the time is that even though you weren't publishing, you never stopped writing. You never stopped being a writer. You never stopped, working on the craft. So do you mind talking a little bit about that? And then, I think it was the Lost Get Back Boogie that, has the record for the most rejections, 111. I think we all need to hear about it. So tell us.
Well, you did a very good summation of it. Yes, I published, I wrote young. I published my first short story when I was 19, published a story in a college magazine. But by the age of 23, I had written my first novel. It took 4 or 5 years to get it published, but nonetheless, Half of Paradise was the book. And I published 2 more books, and with a lot of success. And then I wrote a book called The Lost Get Back Boogie, and I thought I was ready to take off. That book was, let's see, it was rejected 111 times, actually a little bit more than that. But I went the next 9 years without, out of print, and it was a long, long haul. And Philip Spitzer and I met when that's my agent, and we met when he was driving a cab in Hell's Kitchen, and he had a one-man agency. He drove a cab during the day and ran his agency at night. And I remember he was telling, this was Philip, this was many years ago. This was 44 years ago. Philip went mugger hunting in the park. These guys had been terrorizing people in the park. These were bad guys. Look, forget sociology. Yeah. These were really bad guys on the north side of Central Park. And Philip would go jogging at night when he'd had a bad day to bait these guys out of the bushes so he could tear them apart.
He was like the guardian angel.
This is the guy I need. Look, 2 guys held him up with a .45 revolver, and he chased them into the tenant building. He was going to kill them.
That's the kind of guy you want for your agent.
Tell me the last time you met an agent like that. Anyway, he and Alan Fair live out not far from East Hampton now. So
yes.
Anyway, Philip and I met and became great friends. And my novel was published, the great loser of a novel that it had become. My wife actually said, Pearl, my wife said, send it to LSU Press, and I did, and they published it, and it was nominated for the Pulitzer Prize. It's been translated all over the world, the same book that was rejected so thoroughly. But anyway, my wife had a great deal to do with the book getting published.
Yeah, I think I think that's such an important story for people to hear, because obviously the business is a complicated one, and it's competitive, and there are all sorts of layers to why a book might do well, and or why it might not. And so it's just it's just nice to hear about the full journey of like such an iconic writer. Is there something that you would look back now and say to yourself at that time? Like, is there a piece of advice that you would give that writer who is, sort of, you'd had success, you're sort of in this space where you're trying to get your next book published? Is there some advice that you would give to yourself now with the wisdom that you've gained?
Well, I tried to, this was, I was 20 years old. I learned this lesson. I would send out all my material, and I wrote poetry, but anyway, I learned a lesson. when the rejections come back, never leave them at home more than 36 hours. Resubmit them. You just keep
Yes.
the material and you cycle it in and out, and eventually it finds the right home. I met a famous author. He wrote Lust for a Life and The President's Lady. What's the man name? Oh, golly Moses. He was such a nice gentleman. We had a little creative writing group where I went to college, Southwestern Louisiana Institute. It was a poor boy college. Most kids just barely got by. But we had a group of about 8 or 9 people who wanted to be writers. And this gentleman came to meet with us. He was visiting in Lafayette. And I'll never forget the things he said about writing, because all of them turned out to be true. And one of them was, I never write for money, that if you put your heart into your work, eventually money and fame and will come to you. You'll find them. And then he added, in other words, never write a poem or a sonnet to pay your light bill, because be assured your lights will be turned off. What's his name? Golly, I just what a time to forget it. But anyway, I've always felt a debt toward him. Oh, he told us great stories about Hollywood. Said, how do you get along in Hollywood? He said, visit the set, have lunch with everybody, then go home.
That sounds like good advice.
Go home. William Faulkner? No, it was Ernest Hemingway was asked, how did he get along with Hollywood? He said, it's easy. I drive from Miami or Key West to the California state line, and I throw my book across the state line, and somebody throws a bag of money back to me, and then I drive back to Key West. It's easy.
Yeah, usually it comes back without any money, though. That's the usual case. It comes flying back, but it just doesn't have a check attached to it. So that's more like it. I'm looking in the chat here on the side, and I see one question which it kind of ties into something else that I wanted to ask of you. So when I like a long time ago, I stopped thinking about characters as people that I create, and started seeing them more as people that I meet, because that's really more the way I experience it. I feel like they kind of come to me as they are and then reveal themselves to me in layers, very much in the way my reader will discover them. I just this is always kind of the way my brain has worked. And I was wondering if that was true for you with Dave Robicheaux. How did he first come to you, and then how has your relationship with him evolved over? I think is it 27 Dave Robicheaux books? Yeah,
23.
Yeah, 23. And so, how has your relationship with him evolved over your time writing him?
Yes. Irving Stone was the name of the writer, and he addressed that question, and he answered it as you did. He said, don't try to control your characters. The characters will acquire their own voice, and the characters perhaps live in the unconscious. I use a metaphor for it. Yeah. They're encased in the tree, in the heart of the tree, and the tree is made into pulp and into paper, and it goes into the typewriter. But the characters somehow resist what I try to do with them, and I know that it's like, I don't know, I'm witness more to my work than I am creator of it. Yes. William Faulkner, before his death, said, had I not written the books, someone else would have written them for me. He said, another hand would have written them for me. Ernest Hemingway, right before his death, he died by his own hand, he said he took out the old manuscript of The Old Man and the Sea, and he reread it, and he said it was as though someone else had written it, and he knew what a fine work it was, but he didn't feel he could claim credit for it. And so I think every artist knows that it's a gift.
Yeah.
It comes from a hand outside of ourselves. It cannot be acquired. It has to be given. And once a person becomes vain about it, he will lose his talent. I have never seen the exception. I always repeat this, but humility is not a virtue for a writer. It's a necessity.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So you talked a little bit about the unconscious. So for me, through my work, there are a lot of Jungian themes that run through my work. I'm a little bit obsessed with Carl Jung and have been for most of my life. I'm specifically interested in his curiosity about the supernatural. And I don't know how much you know about Jung and his relationship to Freud. But that was the point on which their relationship broke. Freud never wanted to explore the acausal event. He never wanted to. He never wanted to consider anything that was beyond what could be approached by the scientific method. But Carl Jung felt that the acausal event was, that was the thing to explore. Right. And that there was so much about, the psycho-spiritual reality that was unexplored. And he was very curious about it. He had a tremendous curiosity about that. So I noticed, in A Private Cathedral, there's a little bit of an exploration of the supernatural. And so I just wondered where you fell on that, if you too feel that there are some Jungian themes that run through your work.
Well, you went to the heart of the matter again. Carl Jung, of course, believed in inherited memory, and he believed the unconscious was a
unconscious
genetic experience. And I subscribe to that view. Golly, phone, hang on.
That's okay. My dog is in my
and it's probably a robocall. And and a robocall is all day long. It's just all right.
I know, it's crazy.
Use a hydrogen bomb on Silicon Valley. Just bomb it off the earth. Let's go back to inventing the wheel. Keep it simple.
It was so much easier when all we had to invent was the wheel.
Nightmare. I mean, how about, internet is great, but what happens when it goes wrong? You want to blow it apart. Right? Anyway, but Carl Jung believed that memory was inherited, and I feel the same way. And the story is there, and it's Milton talked about that. Milton talked about his blindness and how the hours of illumination in his life came to him only in his sleep, and he would wake to darkness. That's how he put it. Well, I think he was talking about the same thing that Carl Jung did. It's there. Was it Michelangelo or Leonardo? No, it's Leonardo who said he freed the creature or the person from the stone, that he did not carve it. It was waiting to be liberated. And so I have a kind of peculiar neurology, I guess. I don't remember. I have non-chemically induced blackouts, but I do not remember large portions of my work. I do not remember. I read them like somebody else wrote them, but it's always been like that. It's not a very good conclusion. Have to think of yourself like this robot. It's been programmed by somebody else. I've never quarreled with the problem, though. I think that every artist knows this, that for one reason or another, he was chosen to tell a perfect and exquisite moment of truth that everyone, again, who is artistically inclined knows what I'm talking about. It's not a vanity or an arrogance. A person just doesn't talk about it, but he knows it's there, and you have to. And if you don't follow your inclination, the one that was perhaps placed inside your breast, you will be miserable the rest of your life. You may have all the money in the world. Chances are you will not if you don't follow the thing that you're supposed to love. And that's, I don't know, it's a great life. To be a writer is just a great life. And the community of writers, particularly crime and mystery people, because they're not real serious about themselves. You were telling the story about Boucher Khan, this was 20 years back. Big crowd in this auditorium in Vegas. And
oh my God, it was Vegas.
Yeah, that's right. Michael Conley was assigned to introduce me. And so he said, okay, Jim, I'll handle it. Okay, just stand behind me. And I got everything. I got my notes. So here we go, Jim. He says, ladies and gentlemen, we have someone, a special kind of guest tonight, someone who has given a great gift to the world, gift that no one will ever forget. I want to introduce to you the father of Alifair Burke.
The greatest gift in the world. Oh, that's hilarious. That's hilarious. And it actually does bring me to my next question, which was going to be about Alifair. So Alifair is, she's one of my very good friends, and she's, one of the authors that I most admire. Is definitely one of the best people writing in crime fiction, and just, an all-around amazing person. So I just wondered, did you know that Alifair was a writer? Did you know that was her gift as well, and that she was going to, become as successful as she has? And, and how do you feel about it? Are you just like super proud, Dad?
Yeah, this is a fact. She could read the novel Cool Hand Luke out loud when she was 5 years old. That's a fact. Yeah. And she wrote her first short stories in the first grade, and she's been writing ever since. No, this is a fact. She's a genius. Her IQ is not measurable. Only 2 in a million have her IQ. And I believe it. That's right. She graduated top of her law class at Stanford Law. And I tell people this, and I'm not exaggerating, there's a pause. And then the person says, your wife must be so smart. Or Asians are so intelligent. Mike Conley is behind that.
That's so funny. And yeah, Alifair is truly she's just brilliant, and in fact, Karen Slaughter is another good friend of both of ours, and we all, we're both always like, if we don't know something, Karen is inevitably like, let's call Alifair. She's gonna know the answer.
Everyone does that. Half the planet is calling her up all the time.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny. I mean, it's a very literary family. Your whole family is quite literary, right? Is it your cousin, his Andre Dubus, and then his son? Is it Andre Dubus the second or the third?
Andre, it's Dubus. Everyone says Dubus. Yeah, Andre Dubus, the second and the third, and Andre, the second, passed away some years ago, but his son is in Boston, and just a great writer. Andre Dubus second may be one of the best. He's not maybe. He's one of the best short story writers the United States has ever produced. And Andre the Third is a great novelist. If you want a great autobiography about a writer, it's Townie by Andre Dubus III. Boy, it's a beautiful book.
Yeah, The House of Sand and Fog, I think, might be one of my all-time favorite books. Yeah, it's just such a beautiful, beautifully written. It's just like kind of a beautiful train wreck, like all the worst, all the worst things are happening, like in this slow motion, just beautiful prose, and you're just hoping like that things are gonna, pull themselves out. It's such a really brilliantly constructed book. Not necessarily crime fiction, but it definitely has some of that element to it, in from my perspective.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it is. And it also deals with neo-colonialism and the Iranian War and the Iraqi War. Right?
Yeah.
It deals with in a very compassionate way with people who are caught by the forces of nationalism.
People who are just caught in these like situations that they're utterly powerless. It's like everything was almost written for them, either if it was by addiction or by, they're sick with pride or whatever it is. Everything is like, everybody's like totally shackled. And it's just, it's just so brilliantly composed.
Oh yeah, it is. And his short stories are very good too. He's really, I always say he's a nice young fellow, but
he's very nice too. Yes, that's true.
16 years old now.
He is. Really. I'm looking for the question that I kind of blew past before. It was so I was kind of tying it in with your relationship to Dave Robicheaux. This question from the audience is how has the process for your writing changed? I also wrote my first novel when I was 19 years old, and I just finished my 19th novel, and I'm sort of turning, or I just turned 50, but I didn't get a party, so I'm not counting it. I'm going to have to turn 50 next year. Anyway, and but I feel like even though the work has changed, I hope that what I was writing at 19 years old is unrecognizable from what I'm writing at 50 in terms of quality. I really have just sort of spent my life dedicated to, honing my craft and, listening to the voices in my head. But for me, I don't think the process has ever changed. In terms of how I approach the writing. I mean, it's very much, as you say, like I feel like the story is there and I just have to find it. I write super early in the morning. I try to stay as close to my dream brain as possible. And, when I go back to my work, there are often large sections of my writing of my novel that I don't remember writing. So it's kind of a very similar thing. But even though I've been writing all my life and the work has changed and evolved, I hope, I don't feel like my process has changed that much. How do you feel about your process? Has it changed from when you were younger?
No, I'm like you. No, it's never changed. I try to get 750 pages a day, and then I also rewrite the material from the previous day. I do it 7 days a week, and I've over the years worked as much as I could. There are times when I could not, but the greatest challenge to me was to hold another job and try to write. You can do a number of things well when you're tired, but write well is not one of them.
That's so true.
And so I always admire those people who write before they go to work, and then if you worked on a newspaper, you know that for a novelist, there's no worse place in the world to try to survive as an artist if you work in a newspaper.
Yeah.
It's draining, and that's all. It's just, I don't even like to think about it. I just I'm very fortunate today, so I can write full time, and so it's just a great life to get up in the morning and make up the world as you see it, and then feel like maybe you're making a few other people happy too, and then you get paid for it, and you don't have to go to academia. eventually.
You get to just write your stories. That's what we're all working for.
Yeah, and this is Jason again, jumping in from the Reeds and Company side. You've made a lot of people happy, James, and that's for sure. We do have some questions from the audience, so I thought maybe now would be a good time to start to take some of them. Lisa, did you have anything else you wanted to ask before we move to that portion?
No, not at all. I'm good. Thanks, Jim. Thanks for chatting.
All right, so I guess so. Okay, so this comes from Joel Perkat, who's also a novelist. Mr. Burke, how much time have you spent in Louisiana? How much of your descriptive writing is based on memories? How much is based on direct observation?
Well, I've been around Louisiana all my life. I lived there many years in Lafayette and New Iberia. And my family has lived on Bayou Teche since 1836. But what was the rest of the question? How does experience? What does it have to do with my work? Well, I don't know if my direct experience is that influential, but I feel that almost everything in my work has some correlation with people I've known or been around, or just the backdrop that various places I've been. But actually, the story again is one that I feel that I pirate. I realized down the road, I look back at a book 3 or 4 years later, and I suddenly realized where the character came from. Somebody I did know, but I didn't remember his being that important. And then Dave Robicheaux, for example, was based on somebody I knew in college many years ago, but I never realized that. I think more importantly, what's important is not so much the particulars of the story, but instead a notion of correlation between art, the earth, and the metaphysical. And I believe there is another reality. It's at the end of our fingertips. I believe that there's a veil and that there are people on the other side of it. None of this is demonstrable. But I've had one supernatural experience in my life. I know what occurred. I have no doubt about it. I don't try to tell people about it. I don't. But I had direct contact with 3 people who had passed on. And I know that I don't explain it to people. I cannot explain it to myself, but I know what occurred. But I think there are different kinds of arrogance, but I think the greatest arrogance is in the mindset of the nihilist. The nihilist has his points to make, I'm sure. But in effect, to come to the conclusion that the great mysteries out there in the universe, in the galaxy, that all of this happened just because somebody, I don't know, stubbed a toe on a black hole and created all this. There's got to be something. Look, think of it this way. If we're the smartest thing around, we're really in trouble.
That's true.
All right. A few more here. There's more coming in. I don't know if we're gonna have time to get to all of these, so I'll kind of try to sort through them. But I thought this was interesting. I was curious, Mr. Burke, about your thinking about time. When I read your novels, Dave Robicheaux seems to be in tension with the past. What is the value of time and the past for Dave? And what is your sense of time as a writer?
The one loss that we can never replace. And so, and as one grows older, he becomes more possessive about time. But the greatest remorse I think we have as people, as we go through the various stages of aging, the greatest remorse is not what we did, but the things we did not do. And one of those things is the use of time, and to get up in the morning and to realize what a great experience it is, and what the great gift is, the big blue marble. And we have, I think, a charge placed upon us, namely that we have to save the earth. And we're in danger today, serious danger of losing it. We were given Eden. It's a splendid place. What a great playground. But I think we're very cavalier about our attitudes toward it. I think something like 1% of the electorate considers environmentalism or climate change of any importance. I mean, that's frightening. I mean, you can do without a lot of things, but water is not one of them. You know, air. But my heavens, I think in our lifetime, even my lifetime, we will either change what we're doing or we're not going to make it. That sounds pretty dire, but I don't think it's exaggeration.
Yeah, thank you. Lisa, there's a question that's coming for you. And this is, and I don't know if this is too spoilery, so I'll leave it to you to not answer it if you know. Do you think that you left the door open on your last book to have a sequel?
Oh, on Confessions on the 745. I never know the answer to that. You know, so for every book for me, you know, begins and ends with character voice. But there's usually like a germ or a spark, something that gets me obsessed about a certain topic and leads me to like a swath of research. And then the best way I can describe it is if that like sort of obsession connects with something bigger that's going on with me, then I'll start to hear a voice or voices. And those are the voices that draw me through my manuscript. In the case of Confessions, it was, you know, the voice of Selena and the voice of Pearl. And they were both very urgent, very important voices, and I knew that I needed to listen to what they had to say. But when their story was concluded, it'll take a while for me to figure out if I'm still hearing those voices. You know, sometimes I know, you know, when I end a book that I'm going to have to keep writing. You know, usually if I'm still worried about a particular character, if I'm like losing sleep or still hearing that voice, or if I've done something, you know, or something's happened in the book that is, you know, not so nice for that character, or not finished, or not true, or whatever it is, then I will continue thinking about that character and hearing their voice. And then I know that I have to keep going. But sometimes, you know, I think a story is done and then I hear that voice again and there's another story to be told. So it's not, I don't know if the door is ever opened or closed. Yeah. Sometimes, you know, bad things can happen to your characters and they can still come back in a different form. Right. In my books anyway. So so I don't know whether the door is ever open or ever closed, but at the moment I'm not hearing any of those voices from Confessions.
Okay. So I think this is going to be the last question. And this is from a beginning writer, and they're curious about writing and editing and how to know once your work is right. They say that I seem to keep editing, trying to find the perfect sentence, paragraph, but then are shy about sending it out. How does the beginning writer achieve satisfaction in his or her own work to then say that it's done? And I think, James, we'll start with you on this one.
Well, that's a good question. I wouldn't be worried about those things, though. Think of it this way. You write the story, you write it as well as you can, and then you send it off. But be aware of this. You never finish the story. I published my first story, as I said, when I was 19. That was over 70 years ago. And I've rewritten my work, that I wrote 50 and 60 years ago. Because eventually, if you have any success, you're going to see it reprinted. And you can't wait to fix the thing that you should have fixed. It's not that you did anything wrong, but it means you get a second chance at it. But it's like art never ends. It's the one human activity which we share with God. You can put your hand in like in a baptismal fount. You put your hand into infinity. You can actually create things that survive yourself. It's not a bad gift to have.
Yeah, and Lisa, before you answer that, sorry, I just want to, James, I'm not sure if you can see the chat, but I just want to read a comment that just came in. This is from Paul. I just want to say to JLB, thank you. I'm a truck driver. I've had to pull over at least twice to enjoy your amazing poetry of words. It's amazing. It's amazing.
Thank you. I drove a truck too. I did. Badly.
All right, Lisa, what do you say about what advice do you give to this beginning writer?
Yeah, I think it is a great question. I completely 100% agree with Jim. You know, I think that if you wait for the moment where you think your work is perfect to send it out, you're probably never going to send it out. I agree that if I could get my hands on any book that I had written, you know, over the last, you know, however many years, I would, if I opened any of those books, I would immediately start rewriting anything that I had written. I mean, that's just the nature of being a writer. You know, the work is never finished. You know, whenever you go back to it as a different person, you have a different skill set. So my advice is to, you know, first, of course, you have to complete that novel. You know, you have to write the novel, and then, you know, and rewrite it and read it and rewrite it and read it, because even as a successful published writer, you're doing that, you know, still, you know, there's never just one draft of a book. So, and then, you know, if you had somebody that you trusted that could read and assure you that you have, you know, at least managed to bring one reader along with you on the ride, then I think that is a good moment for you to start sending it out. And if you send it out, then, you know, immediately start writing something else. You know, never stop writing. I think a lot of people see the publishing contract as the end of something. They see it as a windfall. But in fact, it really is nothing more than an open doorway to the writing life. And it never stops being about the page, not as an aspiring writer, not as a best-selling, award-winning writer. It never stops being about the page and about the writing. So getting published should be incidental to the act of getting, you know, getting better at your craft all the time. And, you know, there comes a time where you have to kind of build up that muscle that helps you deal with rejection, because, you know, that's something you just have to deal with as a writer. You know, that never stops either. So, you know, just send it out. If it gets rejected, okay, see if you can take something from that rejection, some kind of concrete thing, and just keep writing. That's the only advice.
Yeah. Well, that's great. Thank you, James. Thank you, Lisa, so much for being with us tonight. And, you know, we appreciate everybody who came along for the ride. Sorry again for the technical issues. I hope that it was an enjoyable program for you. A reminder that you can purchase both James and Lisa's books from Reeds and Company. They will ship to you with signed book plates. We're still waiting on some of the logistics on that, so there might be a few days for them to go out, but we do have them, and they are available to you. We're going to continue these virtual events throughout the fall. For any parents or teachers out there, tomorrow night we have a virtual event from Scholastic, which is a book publisher that publishes children's books. You can find that on our website, and next week we start up our next virtual conversations with Stuart Neville, who has been called the King of Belfast Noir. We can't wait for that. But tonight, again, I'd like to once again thank James and Lisa for being here.
Thank you so much, Jim.
Can I tell you an addendum about rejection?
Yes.
Yep.
Do.
Pardon? Anyway, the worst rejection I ever got was from a well-known editor. He was this Lost Get Back Boogie. This is how he began his rejection. I trudged on to the weary end about these two F-ups. I'm not kidding. That's for openers. And then finally he said, sorry, this might be a good script for Steve McQueen or Burt Reynolds, but it's not for us. And I thought, what's wrong with the script for Steve McQueen and Burt Reynolds? They're great actors. Who is this idiot? But I didn't say it.
I love it.
That's great, James. Thank you so much for sharing that. And again, thank you everybody for being with us tonight. And we look forward to seeing you again very soon.
Thanks so much, everybody. Thank you. Thanks, Jason. Thank you.